Some tactics of censorship are usually very straightforward and simple, but most break the law or many laws in some way. So let's take a look and examine some simple examples. Our first examples will relate to what is commonly referred to as identity theft, a type of fraud. In the first example, using my pen name, S.C. Coleman, in the Amazon Mexican website, or Amazon Mexico, the website, they have, or had, my books listed under Layla Stone, which is clearly not the name of the author. Next, we find fraudulent acquisition of an author's name through our disgusting example, or reprehensible example, of a book called Spatterluck, which seems like it was written by someone with little brain function. Now, allegedly, this book was published in September, and it would be very hard to prove otherwise, considering one would need to have evidence from the year of 2011. But I can attest that this book was not around then, and that date is very fraudulent. In the description, it states, quote, Kevin Spatterluck thought he was just an ordinary kid with an angry stepfather who brings home mysterious packages and a loving mother who seems not to notice. Within a matter of days, a stranger with a big nose, flashes of light, plumes of smoke, and a dramatic voice change become part of Kevin's life. Kevin has superpowers, but they're rather surprising. Spatterluck will appeal to anyone who has ever stood up for the underdog or been one themselves. Yeah, this summary does not sound like anything that would be interesting, nor written by a particularly capable writer. And then it also states that fans of action, adventure, and mystery, not to mention superpowers, well, blah, blah, blah. Now, the publication date is important, as September 3rd, 2011, because it will coincide with my first published book, which, of course, naturally, the fraudulent censors at Amazon would have access to. And it also stated in the bio that 9-year-old Josie was given a draft copy. Her letter to SC became Spatterluck's very first review. Now, why is that not, first of all, written as SC Coleman? And second, it's interesting that very first review was given. Now, the publication date's important because it relates to my first published book, which is Israeli Fighting, which was not actually originally published under the pseudonym S.C. Coleman, was instead published under the name S.C.W. Coleman Roush. But then I changed it later. And the reason why they put the date as 2011 is so that they can cite a fraudulent precedence against the first publication date of my first book, which would have been February 29th, 2012. Then if we do a Google search of this book, you'll find that it's the second hit on Google pretending to be written by myself, and of course my Amazon author profile comes first. So let's go ahead and click on this and see where it leads. The company Goodreads appears to be the source of this fraudulent activity, and under the search of S.C. Coleman as an author, their fraudulent book is of course put first and highlighted that it was published in 2011. And if you notice below it, there is no published date. So that, again, it's highlighting a date that would have been before my first book, setting a fraudulent precedence. Of course, it's also interesting that this book only has one review, despite allegedly being published in 2011. Now, if we go down to the About the Author section, we'll notice that 13 books are listed under the author S.C. Coleman. Now, of course, that again is attempting to hijack the author profile of S.C. Coleman and inject a book into the list of works, which was not in fact written by the author profile of S.C. Coleman, or the author, S.C. Coleman, myself. Now, after reaching out to this company about the particular issue, I was given a standard and expected propagandist style response. It quoted, Hi Stephen. Again, not very professional and condescending. I apologize for the trouble with this. I've taken care of separating that book on your profile, as you can see at these links. It seems so far so good, right? No. Because in the second part it says, to clarify this misattribution, I believe the correct term would be fraud, but occurred because we import our data from external sources like Ingram and direct publisher feeds, and that's called a fake excuse. On Goodreads, we differentiate between authors with the same name by inserting an extra space. It may help to note that you're now known in our database as S.C. Coleman with 2 spaces between your first and last name, rather than with a single space. This is to differentiate you from other authors with the same name in the system. The spacing is entirely on the database side, so anyone viewing your author profile page will only see 1 space in your name. Unfortunately, our data sources don't use systems like this. In their data, all authors have 1 space between their first and last names, so when we import data from Ingram, we are importing all 1 space names. Of course, this explanation, which is not an explanation, is letting me know basically that they hijacked the author name S.C. Coleman and attributed it to a fraudulent work, and essentially still are going to continue highlighting that particular work as an effort of S.C. Coleman, and there's no differentiation going here, just a bunch of excuses beating around the bush, the usual propagandistic response. And of course, more condescending explanation states that librarians normally fix issues like this, so in the future, feel free to post in the librarians group, where our volunteer librarians will happy to help you with any librarian requests like this, and blah blah blah. So there you get an example of how they respond to any issue or legitimate issue brought up as far as fraudulent activity is concerned, because they likely originated it. And then after addressing this particular response, I got another similar style of response when it stated, Hi Stephen, I appreciate your feedback via nice reply. Please note that because books are added to our database by our automated system, volunteer librarians, staff, and authors, since they are often added without the author's knowledge, the purpose of adding books to the database is so that members can show that they like to read, have read, or are currently reading them. Since neither of the S.C. Coleman profiles have been claimed by an author, there aren't any individuals attempting to claim they are the author of your books. My apologies that I didn't explain that sooner. Again, another misleading and impolite response, clearly stating that there is no desire to correct this error because it's not an error. It was done on purpose with the intention of adopting the author name and essentially stealing it, co-opting it. And it states that there are more titles associated with one of the S.C. Coleman profiles that you haven't written. Please send me a list and I'd be happy to separate them so that it's clear authors with the same pen name aren't the author of your book. Yeah, that's definitely not going to happen. That would just leave it open for all of those works that are only obviously, as this writer knows, attributed to one author under S.C. Coleman, because there are no other ones, just that fraudulent other work. That would be so they can have more material, of course, to subvert it, and then it's signed in the most cowardly way, Tina C, or Tiana C, a Goodreads expert. Yeah, whatever that means. And of course, that just means that this person would be very difficult to hold accountable because they hide behind unprofessional tactics and won't sign anything personally. Now, in the Constitution of the United States, in the Fifth Amendment, there's one section that's very important, and it's usually highlighted when it comes to intellectual property rights, of which copyright is a subset or a section of the idea of intellectual property. And it says that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Now, that property part is where it relates to intellectual property, of which such fraudulent activity could constitute deprivation of intellectual property without due process of law. Now, onto the next element of censorship tactics, we'll look at access controls. Very common. And in the Amazon Mexico example, at one point, specifically in last year, none of my books, only 2, were actually listed. 2 paperback books. But then onto another example, when it relates to a separate company called Drafted Digital, I was told that, quote, swastikas are not allowed on the cover of your print books with our print service. Now, this comment is referring to a separate book called The Rainbow Reich, and specifically the Spanish version of it, which does in fact not present a swastika. So whoever wrote that does not actually know what a swastika is, and is, again, acting as a censor, censoring things that they dislike. And another method that they use to censor work is through price controls. Now, in Amazon, you can only list a book as low as 99 cents. And in this example, there are 2 of my books that are listed below 99 cents, which is something that I can't do, and would theoretically price my books out of listing, among other things. And then when we look at a different author, also disliked by the corrupt, The Presence of the Past, Morphic Resonance and Habits of Nature by Rupert Sheldrake, we also get this a different type of price control in which the prices do not actually match on the same website, just in different platforms, app versus app store or whatnot. The app's store versus the browser store. Yeah, there we go. And then with this company again, Drafted Digital, we get a different example of access control. And under 2 copies, I received emails stating that my books could not be published because, quote, in Kindle Unlimited, this book is currently available at Kindle Unlimited and therefore ineligible to publish in digital format through other stores. Please resubmit once this book is no longer listed as part of Kindle. Now, this is in reference to one book, which was in Portuguese, but this happened multiple times with many different books. And then another book in the English also had this listed as the reason for its being obstructed. Now, this particular type of activity is highlighted in many places, but a good example of highlighting this activity is in the court case in the Central District of California, the United States District Court, where a 4th amended class action complaint for certain violations and fraudulent business practices, they were highlighted and a jury trial was demanded. Now, this case was taken by a particular law firm, and brought as a class action against the various trucking companies listed there. And in this complaint, it was stipulated that, quote, when considering hiring new individuals, defendants regularly communicate with each other to determine whether an applicant is, quote, under contract with any trucking company. If so, they refuse to hire the individual even though he or she is currently unemployed and otherwise meets the company's hiring criteria. This agreement not to hire each other's current or former employees who remain under contract is a per se violation of federal and California antitrust laws. And one could easily argue that these publishing companies are doing exactly that. Now on to fake reviews as a tactic of the censors. Again, going back to my example of the book Israeli Fighting, which I published in 2012, I immediately got a introduction into this sort of tactic, which I published this while I was still in high school, by the way. One of the later reviews was attempting to hijack and use this review process in a way to promote their own work, and this review does not actually list any useful information. It simply looks like they read through the summary and highlighted one or two things, but then immediately used their review as a way to try and promote something else, diverting attention away, or in a rather lame attempt to divert attention away from the book. But in other fake reviews, one person highlighted that it was a review of Krav Maga, which is entirely not true. It only mentions Krav Maga once. And then the second one said that they did not learn something of a cycle, I believe that's supposed to be style, that they are familiar with. Of course, these reviews appear like they might have been written by maybe robots or some sort of scamming service. But it is clearly an attempt to damage the appearance of the book by publishing fake reviews. Now, all of my response, of course, all of my responses to these reviews were immediately deleted by Amazon. But then I can look also at my Italian publications on Amazon, or my publications in Italian on the Amazon Italy site, and I find 3 fake reviews that were all published by the same individual, but on 3 different books. And these reviews all highlight bad translation and nothing else. Does not appear like anything was actually read, and these reviews are not legitimate. Then when we go to 18 U.S.C. United States Code, Title 18, Crimes and Criminal Procedure, Part 1, Crimes, Chapter 13, Civil Rights, Section 245, Federally Protected Activities, it states, under Section B, whoever, whether or not acting under color of law by force or threat of force willfully injures, intimidates, or interferes with, or attempts to injure, intimidate, or interfere with any person because he is or has been, or in order to intimidate such person or any other person or any class of persons from participating in or enjoying any benefit, service, privilege, program, facility, or activity provided or administered by the United States.